The United States has eliminated Iran's supreme leader. Eliminated. But is this the end of terrorism or the beginning of World War III? In a single moment, the balance of power shifted. But the question is this the end of a chapter of terrorism? Or is the world standing on the brink of a war, whose flames could engulf the entire Middle East? Is this a strategic success, or the most dangerous mistake in history? Now let us understand the entire situation in greater depth. The world is not just hearing a piece of news right now, but witnessing the possible beginning of a new global era. When a country's supreme leader is killed directly in an attack by a foreign power, it does not remain merely a military action. It becomes an earthquake in global politics. In a country like Iran, where religious and political leadership are intertwined within the same structure, the death of the supreme leader can shake the entire system. But it does not necessarily mean that the system will collapse. First, we must examine the legal aspect more deeply. International law is built upon the principle of state sovereignty. If one country targets the head of another country, to what extent is this a violation of international norms? The United States often presents its actions within the framework of national security and self-defense. But the question is, where does the definition of self-defense end? And where does aggression begin? If this action is declared an act of war, was there approval from Congress or the relevant institutions? If not, then was this a limited covert operation? And if it was merely a targeted strike, why do its consequences appear so far-reaching? The second important aspect is the power vacuum. Iran's system does not depend solely on one individual. The death of the supreme leader is certainly a symbolic shock, but real power rests with institutions, the Revolutionary Guard, the religious council, the security establishment, the judicial structure. History tells us that many authoritarian systems do not end with the death of a single leader. Sometimes they become even more rigid. The question is whether moderate forces will emerge in Iran, or whether hardline elements will take even tighter control. Then consider regional politics. The Middle East is already standing on a fragile balance of power. Iran, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Turkey, each has its own interests and concerns. Some countries view Iran as a source of instability in the region, particularly due to its influence in Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. From their perspective, Iran's weakening could be a strategic advantage. But if Iran descends into internal turmoil, its impact could spread across the entire region. Proxy wars could intensify, border clashes could increase, and the diplomatic front could become even more complex. Russia's statement is not merely a reaction, but a signal. If Russia truly believes that the United States has crossed a red line, it could use this opportunity to advance its geopolitical interests. Pressure on the Ukraine front could increase. China will also be observing the situation closely, as every new conflict between major powers affects the global balance. Now let us look at the economic dimension in more detail. The Persian Gulf is the center of global energy supply. If tensions escalate or the Strait of Hormuz is affected, oil prices could skyrocket. The impact would not remain limited to the Middle East, but would reach ordinary consumers in Europe, Asia, and the United States. Inflation would rise, instability would enter global markets, and investor confidence would be shaken. The security dimension is also significant. Iran has clearly conveyed that it will respond. This could mean direct military attacks, cyber operations, or actions carried out through proxy groups. U.S. interests at home and abroad could be at risk. Every major action generates a reaction, and sometimes that reaction is unexpected and even more damaging. The question of political leadership is also important. If this entire process is overseen by controversial leadership facing criticism at home. It can affect international trust. Foreign policy requires long-term strategy, not immediate political gain. Because one miscalculation, one flawed intelligence report, or one wrong political decision can produce consequences for generations. Now the most fundamental question: does force bring democracy? Many chapters of history tell us that after military intervention, a vacuum is created, and that vacuum often gives rise to chaos. Without a clear political plan, the promise of change can turn into instability. The people of Iran certainly have the right to determine their future, but will external pressure make that process easier or more complicated? Another aspect is the global precedent it sets. If today one power targets the supreme leader of a country, tomorrow another power may use the same logic. The international system stands on principles. If those principles weaken, the world becomes more insecure. In the end, we must move beyond emotions and focus on the long-term consequences. This is not merely about the death of a leader, but potentially the beginning of a new chapter in global politics. Will this step bring stability to the region or further instability? Will it weaken terrorist networks or open new fronts? Will ordinary citizens become safer or face greater danger? The world has entered a delicate moment. The coming weeks and months will be decisive. Diplomacy, strategy, and restraint are the factors that can keep this crisis under control. Because when power is used without wisdom, its effects spread far beyond borders. And history bears witness that starting a war is easy, ending it is not.